Do you ever wonder why you can't schedule a designated pilot examiner? It's because we keep having them on the show in the hangar. All right, welcome to In the Hangar. I'm Dan Milliken.
And I'm Christy Wong.
And we got a couple of Joes here, the designated pilot examiners. Guys, thanks for coming. We've had you on many times. We've never had you on together.
No?
Yeah, shouldn't you guys be doing like check rides now or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, I guess we could just launch right into the biggest pilot complaints. So, availability, scheduling DPEs, it seems to be a hard thing. What are y'all's take on that?
Yeah.
Well, I get a lot of phone calls. I get a lot of phone calls. There definitely is a need out there. I know that flight training is there's a lot of need for DPs. How do you get on my schedule, I guess is the question you're asking. So. Be friendly. Email is preferred for me. And if you're not a flight school, and I don't mean that to sound ugly or anything, but I personally have a penchant for the CFI or the person that's on their, the lone person that's out there, because they have a hard time finding DP. So I find myself gravitating toward that person. So if it's a person, because I get a call from a flight school, a lot of flight schools that'll simply say, we'll take you for the next week and we'll keep you busy the entire time. And that's not really my passion. So if I really like the individual CFI, the individual person that needs it, and especially if you're in a more far away place, just because I live further away from the Metroplex. So I feel like those are my homies, if you think that's my place to be. So,
Joey, what about you?
I tend to like when they actually call me. I like the more personal touch. I do get random text. They don't even say who they are. It just says, what's your availability for a commercial check ride? And my response is, and who am I talking to?
Right.
Typically. I'm starting to receive a lot of emails. Apparently there's a website out there now where they can find you and send the email. And the email, of course, comes from the server provider that has created this website. Not real familiar with that whole operation, but I do try to respond to those. And like Joe, I get a lot of phone calls from the individuals as well as flight schools. I get flight schools calling from all over the country asking me to come out. They would pay my airfare, they'll pay my hotel, they'll pay my rate per day, and they'll guarantee me 3 rides a day if I will just come spend a week with them. I'm finding that even in the Metroplex here, most of the flight schools are backlogged 50 to 60 check rides. So there's certainly plenty of work to be done. And then as Joe mentioned, there's also the lone CFI out there who's just trying to simply get his student that's been waiting 6 months, for a check ride. And I get that. And so what I typically do is I keep a backlog of people that are calling. After I've had the one-on-one conversation, as an example, if Christy were to call me and say, I need a private check ride, I'd say, well, Christy, I'm probably 3 weeks to 4 weeks out right now. But if you will text me your name, what aircraft we're using, where we're going to be, I will put it on my backup list. And if I get a last-minute cancellation and you're able to go short notice, I will call you and say, can you be there tomorrow at 5?
So that's another question is, how far in advance do you guys prefer to be booked out?
Okay, so me personally, if somebody calls up and says, I want to book 2 months out, I won't do it.
Oh.
That's me personally.
See, I was that person. I was calling 2 months trying to get on the schedule 2 months in advance so that I had a date.
Here's the problem I have personally is that somebody will book that, but they're not ready for the check ride.
Agreed.
They think they're going to be ready for the check ride, and then
not.
as time comes, they're not ready for the check ride, and it messes up the
See, I'm
schedule.
a different
I'm dealing
species.
with that exactly as we speak. I had check rides scheduled for tomorrow, and I got the phone call yesterday saying my student's not going to be ready on Sunday. And so my response was, I thought he was ready when you called to set the check ride up. So I have kind of made it my idea that I want to see that he signed off in the 8710. So you've got some skin in the game. The instructor has some skin in the game. We've got the endorsements are completed. The training is complete. And if you need a refresher flight, I understand. And if you can't get that done and you need to cancel, well, I understand that as well. But I also remind them, if you're a professional pilot studying for, or if you're a pilot studying for a professional career in aviation, you don't get that option once you become a professional pilot.
No, you do not.
Yeah, Christy can speak to this. When the phone rings and it's your employer saying, hey, we have a trip for you, it's a 3-day trip starting tomorrow, you don't get to say, well, I need a refresher flight before I go.
Yeah.
You have to go to work. You have to be prepared and ready. And I kind of feel for the commercial applicants, that should apply. And then even an instrument applicant, because he doesn't know from day to day what the weather's going to be, and you don't get a practice flight before you take off on your trip. Whereas the private pilot, I'm a little more lenient in that respect. If you need a warm-up flight or something, okay, fine, but you really should kind of be prepared at all times, because when you choose to go fly, do you go warm up before you fly, or do you just get in the airplane and go?
What's your favorite check ride to do? Private, instrument,
I know what it is,
commercial?
yeah.
Mine's a CFI initial.
Yeah.
Mine's a CFI initial.
You like to grill them.
Well,
And as somebody who was his CFI initial applicant, grill is a really
Like
good.
a rack of ribs.
the CFI
Yeah.
initial has such a wide list of things that I can discuss. It's not that it's open, but I get to probe so many different areas. And I will tell you, I think the CFI is such a wonderful rating to have. It's a great rating to have, and I really respect CFIs. And so that rating for me it's fun to do that ride, and at the end when they get that they've really earned it. That's a difficult check ride all day. It'll take all.
I
I
agree.
book one a day, and that's it. And that's probably my favorite to give.
I like the private, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the private, because
You're young, dream chaser.
Exactly. Exactly, and they're most of the time. Well, they're nervous, of course, because this is their very first check ride. So, as in previous episodes, I've told you I try to put them at ease by introducing a lot of humor during the course of the test. And people have said to me, I find you very approachable. I was relaxed within 15 minutes, and my nerves were gone. And it really helps them become successful, moving forward on the test. And then at the end of the day, I go, well, did you learn anything? And they go, wow, I didn't know how much I didn't know, until after the test. So that's my favorite personally, is the private.
Well, and having you both as my DPE, you did my commercial, you did my CFI initial. Yes, I walked away thinking I don't know anything from both of you guys, so I learned a lot. I learned that I don't know much and need to keep learning.
It's one of the hardest parts for me as a DPE. My nature is an instructor.
Right.
I am a natural. That's where I default to instructor. No matter what I'm doing, I'll default to that instructor role, and I don't default to an examiner role. But I'm an examiner. It's so hard for me to not teach during the check ride. In other words, I literally do at the check ride. I'll talk and have fun and try to put them at ease. But then I got to take off that natural instructor hat and put on an examiner hat and be an examiner. Then after the check ride, I'll usually have a longer debrief, not longer than the check ride, but a fairly long debrief. It's not just, here's your license and there you go. But yes, you've passed, here's your license. Now let's talk about these areas that we could have gone deeper, or we could have, where I didn't hear you say this, but I would have really, you could have gone here and it would have been fun, and I like that. To me, that's how I do it.
Okay, well, in keeping with the brutal questions coming from pilots, so what kind of racket is it that only takes cash? So how are you guys getting away with that?
So I've heard that one quite a few times, and that is oftentimes the claim is, this is some sort of a racket.
Ponzi scheme.
Exactly, right? So the biggest issue is that if they write a check, not many people write checks anymore today, but you could always cancel the payment on the check after the services have been rendered. So you come to take your test, you have a poor performance that day, you don't pass your test, you write the examiner a check, and you promptly go home and, hey, put a stop payment on check number such and such. So that's kind of where that came from over the years. Outside of that, I'm set up to take electronic. So if you have Venmo or PayPal or Stripe or Square or something, I'm happy to take that. If you want to bring cash, I always say cash is king, And oftentimes, depending on the test I'm doing, they will show up with a fixed amount of money thinking, well, I thought the test fee was this. And I'll actually say no, and I'll hand them some of the money back. But I'm also the type that I don't typically do refunds, in the sense that if you show up and pay me, we're going to do the test. That's the idea, is we're going to do the test.
Well, you're getting paid for your time.
Exactly. And you'll be amazed at how many people don't respect our time by the calling and setting up the check rides with, for example, they would schedule for 8 o'clock with Joe, and then they would schedule the next day at 8 o'clock with me, and the following day 8 o'clock with another examiner. And if they're not ready with Joe, they cancel his
Holy
ride
cow.
and do it with me, and then if they happen to get it with me, then they call the day before to the next guy and say, hey, I got my check ride completed. So they make multiple
Wow, that
appointments.
really
Yeah,
happens.
I would
it does
almost ask
happen.
for a deposit if that kept, like, if that.
Some
continues to
examiners
happen.
are. I'm not one of those, but some
Okay.
examiners are asking for a deposit and cancellation fees.
Wow.
Cancellation fees.
The cash issue for you. What's your answer?
I like cash. Cash is wonderful. I bet 90% of my stuff is cash. I'll take checks from people that I know and trust. And going back to that, one of the things as far as getting the check ride and being able to schedule it, there should be, not should be, it would behoove a CFI to have a relationship. In other words, if I've got probably 10 CFIs that are actively in the community that know me, and they'll call me and say, okay, I'm getting close with this person, I will promise you I will find a spot for that pilot. We get within a couple weeks, I'm going to find that place where that pilot can get in. If I get the email that, because somebody goes onto the FAA site and finds every examiner
Right.
and goes cut and paste to the entire thing, and you literally get, 40 or 50, people in the 2 blocks saying, any of you available for a checker, I don't even respond. I'm not even, I want somebody to talk to me.
Yeah.
Do you agree?
Exactly. I like the personal aspect of it. And again, a phone call is nice. So now you know who you're dealing with. The blind email in the cold, what's your availability for a check ride? I'm John Doe, and I'm from wherever. And I'll actually try to take the time, if I have it, to respond to that and say, well, my availability is, or I don't have any availability at the moment, just so that I can get a response. And you'd be amazed that a lot of times I do actually hear that, you're the first guy that responded. And I said, well, I understand we're all busy,
What do you mean you have a life? I thought that's all you were supposed to be
Well,
doing.
I guess the big takeaway here is that check ride does not mean check.
Correct.
It should be called a cash ride.
Cash ride.
Could be called that.
Sure. Just make sure we're clear on that.
For sure.
Well, you brought up an interesting thing. A lot of pilots may not realize that DPEs actually do have another life. You guys, are there DPEs that only DPE? Because I know all the DPEs I know work full-time jobs elsewhere.
I don't know very many DPEs that only DPE. I'm sure there's some. I would find it just a really hard life. One of the hardest aspects of being a DPE is not passing somebody or failing somebody. It emotionally, it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. It's
Oh,
not,
wait. I thought you guys fail people just so that you can get another fee when you recheck ride them.
No.
Is that not true?
No, not true at all. Not true at
That's
all.
what I was told.
Yeah.
No, not true at all.
There's a number of rumors that float around like that.
No.
They get started on shows like this, but yeah.
The bad part about it being a DPE is having to be the person that fails somebody on a check ride. They didn't pass that particular maneuver. You got to stop the ride. They did so good up to this place, but they did something. They failed a maneuver, and we are watched by the FAA. They check us out. They call the clients or the applicants afterwards and say and ask questions that they follow up on what's going
Oh,
on.
I can confirm. I got several calls after
Sure.
my check rides for my DPEs and
I got called after my IFR.
how did they do, blah, blah, blah. you
Yeah,
know.
and they're looking for questions that they're looking. But one of the things is if somebody fails a maneuver, they failed the check ride, and we're supposed to issue a notice of disapproval, and that's not a fun thing. But if somebody just does, this is all they do is check rides. You get a lot of that, and plus I think the best pilots in the world are broadly experienced, and I don't want to be the guy that just does check rides all the time. So I fly a lot. I fly a lot of different things. I fly all around. I do a lot of stuff, and I
feel
do
that.
some check rides. So
And you have a career.
Yes, I fly full-time for American Airlines. And then I also do a lot of volunteer work, and I have a charity that I support. And I take our veterans flying in my Stearman, so that's always a lot of fun as well.
ooh, there you go.
Oh, here's the interest. I just realized this, Cup of Joe's. I have flown with each of you in your own Stearman. He's got a steerman, you've got a steerman. Did
We
you know
need to
that?
get, I did not know that.
Go, man. There you go. There you go.
So I've been with you and the steerman. We need to talk.
Yeah. I love the Stearman, I will tell you. It's a
Well,
wonderful airplane.
I would
And
like
it'll
to
keep
know.
you honest for sure.
Absolutely.
It absolutely keeps you
Yeah, I
honest.
remember the first time I ever flew with him, he's like, all right, your takeoff, your landing. And I was like, I've never done this before, but okay. That is a lot of confidence. But we
And here
lived.
you are.
Yeah,
You made it.
exactly. We survived and the steerman survived.
Right,
so.
right. Well, it was obviously a great landing, Christy, because we walked away, number one, and secondly, we can use the airplane again.
Yeah, exactly. I'll take it. I would like to know what your weirdest check ride has been with
nice.
an applicant.
You know, probably the one I had the most internal struggle with was an applicant that came to me and wore a hoodie the entire time. It was for a commercial multi-engine check ride. It was some time ago, but I sat across the table. The guy had a hoodie on. It was a reasonably cold day, but the hoodie it was weird. And then we went to the airplane, and he flew with a hoodie on. He actually had the hoodie on and put the headset on over the outside of the hoodie. I didn't know what to do because it was so strange. It was just weird. It's not my culture, and I know cultures change, and maybe I'm the old guy. Maybe hoodies are cool now.
Well, did he
I don't
start?
know,
Did
but-
he start free-versing?
No, no, but he flew great at the end.
So
of-
he passed.
He passed at the end of the
Okay.
whole thing. I gave him, but immediately I called my FAA managing specialist and said, "Hey, I just want you to know, this is what happened." And I thought it was weird, but it's not my job to judge their clothing choices. But a hoodie, it was the strange. It was at the end.
What pants were they wearing? Because I'm trying to
How
put
did- he
together
doesn't
the
know.
whole
He was so
package.
focused on the hoodie.
Exactly.
But I thought about saying, can you take your hoodie off? But then I didn't. Maybe he's flying with a hoodie all the time. I don't know. And he was flying great. It was a wonderful experience. The guy was a great pilot. But at the end of the whole thing, I handed him his license. We were debriefing, and I said, "Look, a hoodie. Maybe I'm old and weird, and I don't know. But
Oh, so you asked him.
I did.
What did he say?
It was cold.
It was cold, dude.
But it goes to show at the end of the whole thing, my job is to analyze their piloting ability and their knowledge and their ability to fly the airplane, and I think I did, but I found it strange.
So I will say this. I did wear the themed leggings at my check ride, but my DPE and I had an understanding. Like, that's my thing.
Okay.
I think those are cool. That's totally fine
well,
with
they're
me.
comfortable. They and I wore I wore the sectionals for my private and my I think for my CFI, and I wore the instrument leggings during my instrument check ride and my double I check ride. So they were literally themed. Exactly.
Well, okay, so the takeaway here for Joe Casey, if you've got a check ride schedule with him.
No hoodie.
No. Wear a hoodie, but make sure it's sectional hoodie.
Oh my gosh.
So, Joey, you're weirdest.
Well, it's along those same lines. It had to do with clothing, and the applicant, the day we were originally scheduled to take a check ride, we had an issue and had to discontinue. So the applicant returned to finish the flight portion of it, and it was Halloween Day.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so the applicant showed up wearing a full Easter Bunny outfit.
No way. No way. Ears and all?
Ears and all. Ears and all.
What do you do with that?
I said, "This is really what you're planning to wear?" And she, it was a young lady, and she said, "Yes. It's rather cold outside, and the heater doesn't work very well in this aircraft, so this is going to keep me warm." So I was like, "Okay." Well,
Okay, that's
pull the ears back and put the headset on, and let's go. And as he stated, our job is to not evaluate their
Clothing.
culture and their clothing and their likings, but more so their ability to fly the aircraft and their knowledge. And she did a fantastic job. In fact, she's now flying for a regional.
In the rabbit costume?
Now, I don't think she's in the rabbit costume, but
Okay.
I told the guy that was wearing the hoodie, I was like, I'll give you a license today, but if you were coming to me to get hired and to be a pilot for me, I wouldn't do it. It was weird. I wouldn't hire
You
the
are
person
still
if they wore
hung up on that.
It was weird.
Well, it's just interesting that in your weirdest check rides, both of you guys, they passed. So that's a good sign.
Right.
All right. So so the takeaway is wear costumes. It works.
Oh my gosh.
All right, guys.
I'm out of questions after that one. Between the hoodie and the
Yeah.
Easter
How can
bunny.
we continue?
I thought this was going to be like Stump the Chump. Y'all were a lot easier. Than I thought this was going to be. This is
Well,
great.
that's the next time we do a couple of Joes. Anybody out here questions? First up, Jay, what do you got?
All right, Joe and Joe, thanks for coming on the show. My question is, you talked about your weirdest check rides. What about your shortest check rides?
That certainly wouldn't be the CFI initial for Joe Casey. I know that.
No, it's
5.5 oral, by the way.
Yeah, sorry. The shortest check ride for me is always going to be a commercial multi-engine upgrade. So you already have a commercial pilot license, and you're upgrading to a multi-engine, let's say, and most of the things that are already there are already done. So we don't have to rehash those. So the orals has really just a couple areas you have to do, and the number of number of tasks you have to do are less. And so those are probably the shortest.
So how long is that check ride?
Oral's probably 45 minutes, and the flight's an hour and a half, and whatever's in between.
And that's short? My private wasn't an hour and a half flight. Well, maybe it was, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
Right. Well, the only thing I have that would up that would be the commercial single add-on. There are some schools that do the commercial multi as the initial commercial, and so now they come back and add on the single engine.
Oh, so they go, yeah.
It's equivalent of what he's talking about. The oral there would probably, if they're showing up in a 172 and you've got to talk systems limitations and performance on a 172, you're struggling to get 30 minutes in that, and then
If they answer it well.
If they answer it well, that's correct. And then afterwards, you just got to, it's a maneuvers test. So they've got to do their stalls, their steep turns, their landings, and the couple of commercial maneuvers, the lazy eights, the eights on pylons, and the chandelles. But outside of that one, you could probably do that oral in half an hour if it's sharp, and you could do the flight in an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much time do we spend on taxi? Do we have to wait in line to take off? Where I'm located, West Fort Worth, we can take off out of Weatherford. 5 minutes west of the field, we can do maneuvers, and we can either continue to Mineral Wells and complete the landings, or we can come back to Parker County and complete the landings. Most elect to continue just due to the nature of the shortness and narrowness of the runway at Weatherford.
Yeah. Having done my commercial there with you, I concur. All right, next question.
Yeah, in the news recently, aviation news, there was a situation in Alaska where, and maybe you guys, I would think, have heard about this possibly, where they have to be all re-examined for some reason. Have you heard what the reason was that the examiner they met with was no longer qualified and they had to be re-examined? I believe the quantity was at least 40 or 50 and maybe even a couple of hundred that were going to have to be re-examined.
I don't know the case study that you're looking for on that one, but I do know that if a credentialing of a DPE is in question, then everything that credentialing everything that he did under that credentialing would have to be rechecked. For me, I can give a for instance. I don't know if it's applicable, but when I became a DPE and was allowed to do private instrument commercial, and before they would let me do deeper things like CFI initial. When I did my CFI initial check ride, it was before DMS came out. And right now, DPs are managed through a system called DMS, Designee Management System. But I was a DP prior to that system and did my ride with the FAA to become a CFI initial. Basically, I had to administer the CFI initial with a Fed on board watching the show. It's
No pressure there.
No. Yeah. By the way, DPs do take annual check rides
With the FAA.
with the FAA, and we got to go through training, and all that costs money.
And you
time.
gotta wait
Checkride,
6 months to
Checkride.
get in.
Ugh.
Well, what happened on this one?
Do you pay them cash?
Don't answer that. Don't answer that.
No, I've never paid off a Fed. No, but what ended up happening is that when I did my CFI initial ride for myself, that credentialing that occurred, they issue me a certificate. But then, so that certificate was issued to me, but it never made it into DMS. And so it was weird in the sense that, was I really a CFI initial? And I had given, probably 10 CFI initial check rides. And then it came down to, well, we can't find that sheet of paper that shows it. So it was like, where's it at? And then the question, and I was like, I don't know. I mean,
That's y'all's job,
that's
not
y'all's
mine.
job to keep all this in DMS. And so we went into DMS code. Anyway, there was this question, and then there was a discussion of, well, we have to go back and find out who all your rides were to be able to, and it was like, hold on, I really do have to find this. So anyway, I went back, and it turns out that the guy that issued me the check, that was on my observation ride, they found him, and he had all the credentials where he had done everything. But there was a little scary time there. So the point is, if a DPE has done work that he's not or he or she is not credentialed for, and then it's discovered at a later date, well, then all that work that was done prior is null and
Is in
void.
question. Yeah.
Yeah, so not that every single pilot that you did a check ride for now has to do another check ride and redo it, but just in that particular credentialing area.
Exactly.
So like if you got brought into question your commercial whatever, then it would just be the commercial pilot, so it would have to.
Well, so I think what Joe's referring to is in his instance that he was given an authorization on his letter of authorization, or certification on his letter of authorization, and the FAA could not produce the records that they needed in the system to validate the work he had done. So therefore, all of that work now is in question. I think the person who asked the question had more to do with, if you recall, there was an examiner in Ohio a couple of years ago, correct?
And there's a new one in Alaska.
Yeah, the Alaska one, and it's along those same lines,
Yeah.
that there was a question as to whether or not the examiner was doing the job properly, if he was even doing the job, as was the case in Ohio. And so
then they go back and
they
look
go
at
back and they look at
everybody.
everyone that hasn't taken a subsequent check ride with a different examiner, and depending on which rating he gave them, whether or not they would need. For example, if you have a private, and let's say Christy was the examiner and her credentials were in question, and so they want to go back and reevaluate everyone, you've subsequently taken a check ride with Joe as a commercial, they would not reevaluate you because
That's right.
you've demonstrated a higher level of ability with a different examiner. But if you had an instrument rating that she had given you, and that was now in question, and you had only done a commercial with Joe, you would be retesting for your instrument.
Right. Every DPE has what's called a CLOA, C-L-O-A, that basically is a list of the authorizations that DPE is allowed to do. I will say I really like DMS now. It's made it rather easy. It used to be we sent an email or called our managing specialist and said, I'm about to give them notification. And the reason why is the FAA has the ability to show up to any check ride unannounced and show up and watch and observe and make sure
Right.
everything's going like it ought to go.
Which is why it's critical that as a pilot, when you're scheduling your check ride, to make sure you do it in a two-seater.
A steerman.
Yeah, and a steerman.
There probably is a minor benefit to
I
that.
actually had a phone call for a young lady in South Texas that wanted to take her commercial in a steerman.
Oh, really?
Whoa.
And did you do it?
I didn't do it. I was hesitant to do it. My concerns were the power off 180. You know, if she balked the landing or something, that thing could get away from us really fast. You know, and the steerman you solo from the rear seat. The front seat, you don't have the same feel as you do in the back. So,
so
in the
you
back, you feel instantaneously. If the tail is moving, you get the sensation immediately, and you know which rudder. Right. In the front seat, now you're up on the CG. Actually, if not forward of the, almost forward of the CG, right? And so you don't get that
That would
feel.
explain
And now it's more your sight picture than it is anything. And if the applicant were to get this thing going one way, and you weren't Johnny on the spot with it, you're going for a ride through the dingweeds.
Oh my.
I like that.
As an instrument student, would you be willing to administer an instrument check ride in instrument conditions?
Oh, good question.
I can go there if you want.
I
No, I can't go there. I can't go. I can answer
did
the
it
question.
once. You can do anything once.
So the FAA frowns upon that.
Yeah.
They don't want us giving, and here's the reason why, is that whenever we're flying the aircraft, or when we're giving a check ride, we are not the pilot in command. And that's the.
You're
that-
the passenger.
Yeah,
That's
FAR
exactly-
6147, paragraph B. The examiner is not the pilot command during the course of the test.
That's right.
And in instrument conditions, you would be PIC. Because,
You would have to be, because
Yeah.
you're the only one qualified to fly.
Oh,
the
so
aircraft.
it's a-
So the flight plan and everything is in the examiner's name. If the student messes up and there's a violation involved, the examiner gets the violation. So it is frowned upon. I attempted to do an ATP.
Okay.
The guy, you know, this guy is multi-engine rated, he's instrument rated, he's a high-time pilot, and he wanted to do his ATP. And the weather wasn't bad, it wasn't like it was low IFR, it was around 1,1400 broken. But yet we had a layer that we were going to need to go through. At the time of the mistake, we were actually in VMC conditions on top. And we were issued a holding clearance, which I had requested, you know, as part of the test. And he messed up the hold. To the point that I was uncomfortable that ATC was going to say something about it. And just as I was keying the mic to tell her, the controller, that we're going to need some vectors, she said, yeah, you're going to need some vectors. And so at that point I said, okay, this is unsatisfactory. You obviously need some work on an understanding of holds, entries, procedures, et cetera. So that's the very reason why you won't find many examiners who will do an instrument ride in instrument conditions.
That's right. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't do them. I don't do it.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah.
I think we had one more.
Oh, we do?
Yep. She got her.
Oh, she's got her hoodie.
That is awesome.
I'm kidding. So even just standing here in front of a couple examiners, you know, my palms are a little sweaty and my voice is going to crack. Do y'all take into account when people come to their check rides with you that, man, they are anxious, they are nervous, their performance, and as a CFI, I tell all my students, the best you do with me, you're going to do 80% of that with an examiner because of nerves. Do y'all take that into account at all when someone's sitting there with you and just not saying the right thing or just
Yeah.
missing something clearly obvious
100%.
that you know they've done or they wouldn't have
Yeah.
been signed off?
Yeah, 100% agreed completely. One of my things that whenever I give a ride is that I try to diffuse all of that. I tell them, look, the worst that can happen, I mean, if everything goes wrong in here today, the worst that can happen is I say, no, not today. And then you get to come back. The world didn't end. It's not going to be a big, gigantic deal. You get to come back. But you would think the world would end with, because the people that have that perspective that the world's going to end if I fail this check ride, usually the check ride goes rather poorly.
Yeah.
And
If you don't cap the anxiety at the very beginning, it'll eat them alive during the course of the test.
Yeah, I guess the wheels can come off. So, well, all right. Well, Chewy here is telling us he's had enough of the DPEs. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much for watching.
enjoyed it, Joe.
Yep, enjoyed it.
And we'll have them back for another episode of this at some point. So,
Giant dog.
Giant dog. Christy loves Chewy, as you can tell. Or anyway, thank you guys for watching, and thank you for supporting our sponsors. We're going to put a list of them in the description, so please visit them. Supporting them helps support us.
All right. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.
In the hangar.